Billionaire hired 100 doctors for his silent daughter, until a street cleaner did the impossible. No one in New York City could forget the name Ethan Reynolds, the billionaire who built half the city's skyline, yet couldn't fix the one thing that truly mattered, his daughter. At only 6 years old, Lila Reynolds hadn't spoken a single word in her life. Ethan had everything money could buy, private jets, estates, fame, but when it came to his daughter, he was powerless. He flew in doctors from Japan, therapists from Switzerland, neurologists from Germany. Over 100 specialists came and went through the grand marble doors of his Manhattan penthouse. Each one left with the same helpless look. "There's no medical reason for her silence," they'd say. "It's psychological. She's capable of speech, she just won't." Ethan's wife had passed away during Lila's birth. Some said Lila's silence was grief's echo, a wound she never saw but carried deep inside. Every morning, Ethan would kneel beside her and whisper, "Good morning, my sunshine." And every morning, she would smile faintly, trace a heart on his palm, and say nothing. It broke him a little more each day. One rainy afternoon, Ethan's car got stuck in Manhattan traffic. Frustrated, he glanced outside and noticed a man sweeping the streets with a small broom, humming softly despite the downpour. The man looked ordinary, worn jacket, mismatched shoes, but his smile was brighter than the streetlights. He seemed to hum life into the puddles he cleaned. Ethan rolled down the tinted window, curious. "Aren't you cold?" he asked. The man looked up, surprised to be spoken to by the man in the luxury car. "Maybe," he said cheerfully. "But the rain washes away the dust, doesn't it? Everything gets a fresh start." There was something about his tone, unshaken, calm, almost poetic, that lingered in Ethan's mind. The next day, by some twist of fate, the same man appeared outside the Reynolds estate, sweeping the sidewalks. Lila, usually silent and withdrawn, stood by the window and watched him. When the street cleaner saw her, he waved. She tilted her head curiously. That evening, Ethan noticed something remarkable. Lila had drawn a picture for the first time in months. It was of a man sweeping under a rainbow. The man's name was Caleb Morris, a 45-year-old widower who cleaned the streets to make ends meet. He'd once been a music teacher, but after losing his wife and his job, life had stripped him of everything except his old harmonica. One morning, when Ethan left for work, he found Lila sitting by the gate, waiting. She pointed to Caleb outside, sweeping near the corner. "Do you want to go out?" Ethan asked gently. She nodded. It was the first time she'd asked to leave the house since her mother's death. Ethan hesitated. She never spoke, barely interacted, but something told him to let her go. Caleb looked surprised when Lila approached. She simply stood there, watching him sweep, eyes wide with fascination. He smiled. "Morning, little miss. Want to help?" She blinked. Caleb handed her the smaller broom from his cart. "There's always enough work for two," he said kindly. She took it without a word. For 10 whole minutes, the billionaire's daughter swept the sidewalk alongside a street cleaner. And for the first time, Ethan saw her smile, not a polite one, not the fragile kind he was used to, but a real, glowing smile that reached her eyes. From that day, Lila waited for Caleb every morning. He'd hum little tunes, and she'd follow his rhythm, sweeping or drawing shapes in the dust. Ethan, secretly watching from the window, saw something changing. She laughed silently, danced in the puddles, even started humming back. Caleb never treated her like a fragile princess, he just treated her like a person. "Why do you hum so much?" she once scribbled on a notepad and showed him. He smiled. "Because music heals things words can't." Ethan read the note later that day, tears burning his eyes. 2 weeks later, Ethan invited Caleb inside for coffee. "You seem to have a gift," Ethan said. "I've hired over 100 doctors and therapists. None of them reached her like you did. Tell me, what's your secret?" Caleb chuckled softly. No secret, sir. I just listen, even when there are no words. Ethan stared at the man before him, someone who had nothing, yet seemed to have everything that truly mattered. I'll pay you whatever you want, Ethan said impulsively. Just keep visiting her. Help her, please. Caleb shook his head. You don't owe me anything. Sometimes kindness is payment enough. That simple line hit Ethan harder than any speech from his board meetings. As the weeks passed, Lila's world bloomed. She started painting again, pictures full of color and sunlight. Ethan even caught her singing softly under her breath one morning. It was barely a whisper, but it was music. Caleb's song, she wrote shyly when he asked what it was. The following day, Ethan planned a small surprise. He asked Caleb to come to the garden. Lila was already there, sitting with a small harmonica in her hands. Caleb smiled, kneeling down. You found one. She nodded eagerly. Then, to Ethan's astonishment, she pressed the harmonica to her lips and played a few clumsy notes. Caleb joined her, harmonizing softly. The two created a melody that drifted through the air like sunlight after a storm. Ethan's eyes welled up. He hadn't heard music in his home since his wife's death. And then, it happened. When the song ended, Lila looked at Caleb and whispered, barely audible. Thank you. Ethan froze. Caleb froze. The world itself seemed to stop breathing. Tears filled Ethan's eyes as he knelt beside her. Lila, you spoke. She turned to him and smiled. Music feels safe, Daddy. For the first time in 6 years, Ethan heard his daughter's voice. It was small and fragile, but it was real. He broke down, hugging her tightly, unable to speak. Caleb stood quietly, emotion clouding his eyes. News spread fast, the silent era speaks again. Everyone wanted to know the doctor, the breakthrough, the miracle cure. But Ethan said nothing. He didn't mention Caleb's name to the press, protecting the man's peace. A week later, Ethan found Caleb sweeping outside the park again. You changed her life, Ethan said softly. You gave me back my daughter. Caleb smiled humbly. She just needed someone to remind her the world still sings, even when it's quiet. Ethan handed him a small envelope. Inside was a note and a check for $1 million. Caleb looked at it and smiled faintly. I can't take this. Ethan was stunned. You earned it. You deserve it. Caleb shook his head. What I needed, I already got, hope. And you got your daughter back. That's more than money can buy. He placed the envelope back in Ethan's hand, then walked away, humming the same tune that had once healed a little girl's heart. Months passed. Lila grew stronger, talking more, laughing freely. She asked her father one day, Daddy, can we go visit Mr. Caleb? Ethan smiled. Of course. But when they reached his usual spot, someone else was sweeping there. Where's Caleb? Ethan asked. The man sighed. Old Caleb passed away 2 weeks ago. Heart failure, they said. He was still humming when he collapsed. Lila's eyes filled with tears. She clutched her harmonica tightly. Ethan knelt beside her. Hey, sweetheart, you know what Caleb would want? She sniffled. What? For you to keep his song alive. That night, she played his melody before bed, the same tune that had once brought her voice back. Ethan listened from the doorway, tears streaming silently down his face. Years later, Lila grew up to be a music therapist, helping children who had lost their voices to trauma and fear. In every session, she taught them the song Caleb had hummed. When asked where she'd learned it, she'd smile softly and say, from a man who cleaned the streets but healed the soul. And somewhere, perhaps beyond the rain and noise of the city, the melody continued, gentle, steady, eternal. Because sometimes, the greatest miracles don't come from money, medicine, or power. They come from kindness, from those who have nothing to give except their heart.